Today, I'm going to be talking about the unique challenges of being an introvert and building a coaching business. I think this is something that is really important to talk about so that we come from a place of understanding and being more loving and accepting of ourselves through the process of building a business. Because I myself am an introvert and I work with mostly other introverts. And I've definitely seen the impacts that being an introvert has on the process of building our business. And I think a lot of us don't understand this. And we're so caught up in comparing ourselves to everyone else, a lot of people who might be more extroverted, and thinking that something is wrong with us because how we build a business and how long it takes us to build a business may be different than it is for people who are more extroverted. And so I want to talk a little bit about the big things that I have noticed that are different for us as introverts as we build a business. So when you are going through this process, you can come from a place of being more accepting and understanding of yourself. And just to tell you a little bit about my story with being an introvert, it's actually been a huge area, I would say, of personal pain for myself. I would even go so far as maybe saying trauma, because I made how I was feeling wrong, and made it mean that something was wrong with me and that I needed to try to fix myself. And I really experienced this more as I got, I would say, to like my teenage years, and started socially hanging out in bigger groups of people, hanging out with people I didn't really know, and really started experiencing this feeling of inferiority because of how I was feeling in these experiences. And this big feeling of not being seen or not being noticed, and feeling like I had to act different than who I was to get the attention, or I would say, like the attention or being seen or being noticed, because I wasn't getting it just by being me, because I was kind of quiet and shy, and just felt like inferior to the people who were just like thriving in these group settings that I was not my forte. Okay. And I never even got made fun of. Like, I never had people say anything mean to me. I just internalized all of this to make it mean like something was wrong with me and that I had to try to make up for it in some way. And when I was starting my business, I even wrote some articles about how this impacted me. And I wrote, it's interesting because I came across being highly sensitive as well, which I am. But actually more of what I experience had to do, I think, with being an introvert than being highly sensitive. And I think they're kind of similar, although supposedly highly sensitive people can also be extroverts. But introverts have more to do with how we interact or express energy. Highly sensitive is more of, it's almost called almost like a sixth sense, or how we maybe respond to different stimuli in our environment. And so I wrote 2 articles. One was about actually developing an eating disorder and how a lot of that stemmed, I said, from being highly sensitive, but I think a lot of it stemmed from being an introvert and probably being highly sensitive and just feeling inferior to other people and trying to make up for that in some way, which I tried to do by controlling my food and my body, right? And then the other one was around my inferiority complex and how that really stemmed from these deep feelings of discomfort that I had in social settings and especially in large groups, and just feeling like that's such a big part of our social life when we're growing up. So I felt like something's wrong with me. Like, why can't I show up like people who are more extroverted, and just have fun and, relax in these social settings? So I didn't really know about any of this stuff. So I just internalized it as like, oh, something's wrong with me. I'm inferior to other people. And so that's been something I've really had to work with as I grew my business. I've had my business for over a decade. So it's been an ongoing process. And I had to do a lot of work around that just to even start getting visible in the beginning of my business and feeling, confident about who I was and what I had to offer. But it has been an ongoing process and something that I've really revisited lately, to just see like that I still have, these things, or these feelings that I would say struggle with a bit with being an introvert and being seen in the way that I want to. And I think a lot of introverts think that they don't want to be seen. They want to be kind of behind the scenes. And it is true. I don't think we need to be the center of attention, or that isn't something that we necessarily want. But we do want to be seen. We want to be acknowledged. Everyone does as a human being. Like that's something that you want. But a lot of times what happens is we are afraid of not being seen, like putting ourselves out there and not getting the acknowledgement of being seen, or getting criticism, or I think a big one is just like not getting the acknowledgement of being seen. I know that was big for me. Like I felt like if I just showed up as myself, my introverted kind of shy self, that I just wasn't seen. I wasn't acknowledged. Like it was just kind of ignored. And so, I think that's a big thing. So I want to talk a bit about in 2011, there was a study by the Wellesley Department of Psychology, and they came up with the 4 main characteristics of introverts. And I really resonate with these, and I think they're really helpful to talk about when it comes to having a business as an introvert and how this impacts you. So the 4 main characteristics that they came up with are social, so how we interact in social situations, thinking, like about our thinking, how we think. Anxious is actually one of them, and I'll explain this. I think it's really good for us to know. And inhibited. Okay. So I know for me, like the anxious piece, the inhibited piece, and probably the thinking piece were things that I made feel like wrong about me. Like I was like, okay, Kristin, this is not okay. It's not acceptable. Whereas really it's just like an inherent trait that we have. And being an introvert, I don't think they even know like how much of it is genetic versus how we were raised. But if you were raised in a more introverted family, I think you're more likely to be introverted. But I also think some of it is genetic from what we know. But needless to say, none of that really matters. It just matters if you resonate with this and recognizing how it's going to impact you when you are building your business. Okay, so let's talk about the 4 different things and how it impacts us in our business. So the first thing is social. And as introverts, typically we do better in small groups or alone. We don't typically thrive in like big groups of people. I would say like if it's a big group of people, all people who you're really comfortable with and you know really well, then you're probably fine, right? But if you go and you like go to this big party and you don't know people, you probably feel awkward. like I do. Like that is not my favorite thing. Like it just feels really uncomfortable to me. And it doesn't mean I never do it. I still do it because I think getting out of our comfort zone can be good. And I think we can find that sometimes we do better by stretching our comfort zone, right? But overall, like going to a big group and being part of a big group where I don't know people, like it's very uncomfortable. And I think a lot of times we think as introverts, like that the definition is like we always need to be alone or we want to be alone all the time. And that is not true. Like introverts do like to be around people, but once again, it's typically smaller groups of people or groups of people where you know everyone. So I think that's an important thing to recognize. Like that's where we kind of thrive and do best. Because this is the other thing. As as introverts, I think one of the big traps that a lot of introverts fall into in their business is spending too much time alone, especially if you have an online business. And I can say I am guilty of doing this because we are very comfortable being alone. But as human beings, we are social creatures. We are meant to be around other people. And I think it's very, very important for us to get that in our business. Especially if you are a solo business owner and you work alone, like we still need social interaction. We just need to find the right ways to do it that work for us. And this is why I've been really finding that my clients are having a lot of success with actually doing some in-person marketing and events, because we do need that social interaction. I think it's, like I said, very important. Like we saw in COVID, like how much not being able to be around other people in person impacted so many people's mental health. And so I think it's important to recognize, like, as an introvert, I think I thought this too. I'm like, oh, I can do everything online now and I don't need to go and do any in-person stuff with people. And I think that is false. I think having social interaction in person is really important for our mental health. And it's something that we actually enjoy as introverts if we can find the right situations. So that's really important, finding the right situations. When I first started my functional medicine chiropractic business, I did a lot of in-person like networking groups and stuff, but I found a lot of groups that I didn't like and forced myself to do those groups. You have to find the right situations, and that's really important. Okay, so that's the first one, social. The second one is thinking. So as introverts, we spend a lot of time absorbed in our imagination and in our inner thoughts. And I think this is just important to recognize, like introverts a lot of times will spend more time reflecting inward instead of just kind of acting outward. And that's why a lot of times we think more about the actions we're going to take, or we're just a little bit slower at taking those actions. We spend more time thinking. And that's why I think a lot of us get stuck in analysis paralysis, overthinking things. We just spend a lot of time thinking. So it's something we need to be aware of when we are working on our business, so that we don't get stuck like overthinking and not taking action, because it just can be something that we do more of than people who are more extroverted. So the next one is anxious. So this is kind of interesting for me to see that introverts are probably more likely to experience anxiety, right? To be more anxious. And this is actually from the study. They came up with this. So we need alone time because company of other people prompts feelings of shyness, social awkwardness, or lack of confidence. And often in our alone time, we will ruminate on the past or worry about the future. So this is something that's actually inherent or has been studied and shown in introverts. And this is something that I made think was like wrong with me, because I would feel more anxious and I would feel shy. And just so you know what shyness is, because I was looking this up, shyness has more to do with when you're in a new environment, feeling uncomfortable. Like let's say on the first day of school, you go and you're in a new class, like when we were younger, and you felt really uncomfortable. But then as you get to know your classmates, that feeling of shyness will fade as you get to know people, and you will feel more comfortable like interacting. And this is why I was saying too, like if you're in a big group of people that you know really well, like maybe your family or a big group of like close friends, you're probably going to feel a lot more comfortable than if you're in a big group of people you've never met before. But so that's shyness, is kind of like working up your comfort as you get to know people. And when you don't know people, probably feeling kind of like inhibited and not really loving being around those people. And once again, like just knowing that these are feelings that are normal and not making them wrong, because that's something that I really internalized and was like, something's wrong with me because I feel this way. And I think it just had a huge impact on me to really internalize that and make it wrong, as opposed to just being like, hey, it's okay. Like I need alone time, because when I'm in the company of other people, I'm going to have more of these feelings, and that's okay. And making sure that we're giving ourselves that space that we need. And also knowing that we are more likely to ruminate on the past and worry about the future. So just knowing these things, I think, is important. So the last one, number 4, is inhibited. So we are more likely to act with restraint than impulse, and we tend to keep our thoughts and feelings to ourselves. And generally, we don't pursue thrills and new sensations until we have had plenty of time to consider the choices. And this is where I think patience is so important, and knowing as an introvert that you may do things slower than people who are more extroverted, and that this is okay, because we have more restraint and we need more time to reflect on things before we act. And when it comes to doing new things, we are more inhibited. Like we're more going to think about it and reflect on it than people who are more extroverted. And we don't really seek the thrills as much. I was reading that extroverted people generally are less sensitive to dopamine, and so they look more for like thrills and for interaction and for the social stuff to get the hits of dopamine. Introverts generally maybe have more dopamine or aren't as sensitive to it, so we don't look for like those outside thrills. And I think this is really important also to think about when it comes to like social media and the way that we are marketing. Like this is a huge part of when it comes to an introvert versus an extrovert. We have to think about how we're marketing and use our skills as an introvert and understand our energy and how the different things we're doing are going to impact our energy. So just like it said, we are more likely to keep our thoughts and feelings to ourselves, which is why almost all introverts that I speak to say they aren't big into social media. They don't really use it personally, at least not much. And it's something that they aren't super excited about. And this is a big reason why. Extroverts maybe just want to put their life out there. They want to share about it. They like doing it. It comes very naturally. For us, it doesn't. And so to force yourself to do that, it's going to feel incredibly energetically draining. Okay. Like this is where we really have to look at this and come up with marketing that works for you. And this is a huge part of what I help my clients with, because a lot of introverts learn from people who are more extroverted how to market their business. And what ends up happening is that it doesn't feel good to them. It feels inauthentic, and they end up burning out and hating their business and wanting to quit. But when we can find a way that to market that works for you, then you can build a business that feels good. And once again, I think it's important. Like a lot of introverts also think like, oh, I could never do videos. I want to hide. I don't want to put myself out there. That's not true. Like when I started doing videos, I was very, very uncomfortable doing them. But I wanted to be seen, because we all want to be seen. And I've gotten comfortable with doing videos just with practice. And it's something that I really enjoy. And I can say one of the things I really enjoy is coming from a place of teaching and sharing and building kind of a longer form content like I do with videos or podcasts, versus trying to entertain people on social media by, doing reels or dancing around or pointing to things, or, that's just not really my thing or my forte. I think maybe people who are more extroverted enjoy those things more. So I've really had to find what works for me. And I've made a lot of shifts as I've been running my business, and I continue to do so to just make my marketing and my business feel more and more aligned as an introvert and in a way that really works well for me. But once again, I think one of the really important things to recognize as well is just the importance of patience as an introvert in your business, and knowing that because we have these certain traits as an introvert, that things will most likely take a bit longer in our business than they may for people who are more extroverted, and they're just more willing to put it out there faster because they don't have to kind of like process through all the things that we do, and it's just not the way that we do things. So I think a lot of introverts are just comparing themselves, and they're like, it's not happening fast enough, and they're not giving themselves kind of the time to process through things. And also, we may have this kind of built up story like I did about being inferior and having something wrong with us because of being an introvert, and telling ourselves that that's not okay. Or maybe we were teased about it, or not seen growing up, or not seen in our friends groups, or whatever it is. We may have like these past things that we kind of have to work through as well, as we work on building our business. But when it comes down to it, as introverts, we are some of the best coaches because of some of the skills that we have as an introvert, and being more reflective inward. And I think we have a lot to offer, and we are just as capable of building a successful business as people who are extroverted, but we have to do it in our own unique way. So I think it's, once again, important to acknowledge all of these and just be aware of them, so that you are giving yourself the grace that you need to build a business in a way that feels really good to you. So if you found this video helpful, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you want more videos like this, subscribe to my channel. And if you want to dive a bit deeper into the steps of building a successful coaching business as an introvert, I have a free training where I go through that, and I will link it below. And I want to thank you so much for joining me. Let me know, did you find this video helpful? What are your takeaways from being an introvert and trying to build a business? Is this resonating with you? The 4 things that I went through: the social, the thinking, the anxious, the inhibited. Is this ringing a bell, and are you feeling a little bit more seen and understood with having this knowledge? Let me know in the comments. And I want to thank you so much for joining me. I will see you next time.